Hey there, I'm Sarita, and you're about to experience the modern approach to well-being where you get to establish the best and most important relationship you will ever have, the one with yourself. I'm on a mission to help you declutter energy and reclaim your power so you can be a magnet to what you desire. If you're looking for the optimal blend of mindset and healing, you're in the right place. My goal in this podcast is to share tools, resources, and practices that will help you along your healing journey. I'm so excited to be here with you today, so welcome to Back to Here with Sarita. Let's get started. Hello, you, and welcome to another episode with your host, me, Sarita. We have a wonderful self-embrace story today, and I love these episodes because I get to connect with some amazing women and hear their journeys of self-love and healing. And today, I have an amazing guest. Her name is Denese Duran, and Denese is the founder of Podcasters of New Jersey, a podcast incubator to assist podcasters with growing their knowledge of the industry and equipping them to host and produce podcasts for themselves and others. Denese has also launched Podcasters Unlimited, a podcast network and consultant, serving as its CEO. In her career, Denese holds a master's degree in social work from Keene University in New Jersey and is a licensed social worker. She's a mom and soon-to-be bride. Welcome and congratulations, Denese, especially for the upcoming wedding.
Thank you so much, Sarita. This is I'm honored to be on this. This is very exciting that I'm able to, talk to you and meet you and, coming from me being out here in New Jersey and connecting with everyone through podcasting is always amazing. So thank you for having me. And the wedding's literally 19 days away.
That is so exciting. Wow, you have such an eclectic background and I love it. I was so excited when we connected because I wanted to have somebody that has social work as part of their background. And so as you know, with the self-embrace stories, more speaking to my audience, but the self-embrace stories is to really hear from everybody around their journeys of healing. And when you and I connected, there is something in particular that you really wanted to dive into and actually share, and we'll get into that momentarily. But if you want to tell us just a little bit more about yourself first, and then we'll dive into like what that self-embrace or that self-love story looks like.
Sure. So I actually just turned 40 this year. So turning 40 was really epic for me, especially because of everything in my journey and the things I've been able to accomplish. And I'm super grateful. I'm a person of passion. I move with intention. I'm a creative. I'm a mom. I'm hold family and friends very dear, and I love to connect with people. And turning 40 really changed my perspective on understanding gratitude and taking gratitude to a higher level, because sometimes we're just doing forward movement and we don't really take the time to sit in our blessings and really realize how lucky we are to even reach the age of 40. So a little bit about me, that's who I am. I love to laugh. I'm into movies. I like to read, and I love to connect with people. That's something that's part of me.
I love that. I know the pivotal time when you hit the 40s, I was actually speaking to one of my friends the other day, and she just turned 40, and she was just saying how it just was like this transition where it's like, I don't really like what I used to care about when I was younger, the people that I used to people please, like all this stuff. I would go so the distance, and now it's like, like for what, for why, and it's more about me. So I love that. The creativity aspect is such a bonus, and I can see that through all the podcasting communities that you're a part of and created, and I absolutely love that. Can you tell us just a little bit more about like what inspired you to start all the podcasting communities?
Well, I actually went to an arts high school, and I played the flute since the age of 9 until I was 18. So I played here in New Jersey. There was Newark Symphony Orchestra, which is part of NJPAC. So I was a part of that. I did all city band. So I was always into music and some form of art. And getting into podcasting after high school and college in my later 20s, I think early 30s, was just another form of me to use that same creativity that I did as a kid and really connect with people. I actually ended up podcasting. My one of my good friends, who's actually in my wedding, her brother was a promoter for boats out here in the East Coast. So they didn't get a lot of radio play to get promotion, so they started their own radio station. So that's how they were promoting their parties. And one day she goes, "Hey, listen, my brother's doing some radio stuff. Do you want to come over and do some internet radio?" This is back in 2011 when you had like Ustream and live stream and
Mm-hmm.
internet radio. So I'm like, "Yeah, sure." She's like, "Yeah, it's guys versus girls." And, I actually went there, and we had such a good time. And they actually started asking us to be part of the show. So then for 2 years, we did this show called, for the first year, it was called Sexaholics, where we would talk about sex and party. And then after that, we were like, okay, this is too much. We changed the name to Get Focused. So we would get independent artists and independent creators who would perform on the boat, or anybody in the tri-state who had their art, and we would interview. It was myself, two other my friends, and two other guys. So it was just a good time. And after that ended, I still wanted to know more. Podcasting was around, but internet radio is what we did, and I actually met a mentor of mine. His name is Michael Thomas, who worked for Sirius XM, on one of the stations, Old Town, I think it's one of the stations there. He was the head DJ and he created his own internet radio station. And when I met him, I got into learning about production, contacting artists. He knew some celebrities, and I actually ended up producing and do production. I did that for a long time as a hobby, for like 5 or 6 years. And then here comes podcasting. I'm still doing internet radio in like 2018, 2019, and I was like, oh wow, I'm doing this production. I have these hosts, but I'm not in it. It was a it felt very alone. So then, I created Podcasters New Jersey in 2019, and I was like, let me just meet other people. So that's pretty much what happened. And after that, I've been doing podcasting literally because internet radio is similar, but podcasting is a little different because with internet radio, we had the opportunity to play music and do different things because of the licensing of internet radio that they have versus with podcasting. So yeah, and I started Podcasters of NJ. We met a lot of people. It was going good for a year. Pandemic came, and we said, let's start our own podcast. Like, we're teaching podcasts. We did internet radio. We stopped doing that through the Love Zone. That's what I did for years. And we had great success with the internet radio. But once we started Podcasters of NJ and the pandemic came, we had something to say, and that's me and Ann Smith, who is my business partner. She's one of the co-founders of Podcasters of NJ and Podcasters Unlimited. Without her, I wouldn't be able to do it. And shout out to her. She's amazing. And we started our own network. We didn't know nothing.
That's
Nothing.
so amazing. That's so cool. I just love hearing from people like how they get into something that they're so passionate about, and it sounds like it was something that was really needed for yourself. So it's like you created that community as well. And so to kind of shift gears a little bit, like the other side of you, and it's really cool to see these two dynamics that you're so passionate about come together. The other part of you is that you're a social worker and that you have been in this arena for a while. One of the things that you shared with me is that you've gone through the process yourself, being on the other side.
Yes.
And I really would love to know more about that. And that's something you and I were chatting about originally. And this is something that you have felt compelled that you want to share this part of your story that you haven't talked about before. And that is going through different programs, being part of the other side of the social services, being somebody that has gone through dependency, big time dependency. Right. So I would love to hear, especially for our audience, like around that, how that kind of started and what that process looked like. And I'll definitely ask you more questions about like how you loved yourself through that process too.
No, yeah, it's interesting because I share this with you. I never really talked about it because I always, once a thing started going, I was just really focused on my journey, just being present. And a lot of the things that I went through to be where I'm at has to do with resisting. I resisted pain. I resisted accepting myself. I resisted loving myself. And, to talk about that in I would say, I guess around the age of 21, 22, I started, I worked in the industry and banking industry and I drank a lot. And it was very normal. I would go out, drink with my friends, but it just spiraled. I would say 29, 30 years old, I was drinking excessively and things weren't going the best for me. And it was one pinnacle that I hit in my life where I ended up, having a car accident, getting into a really bad car accident. And when I was 26, I ended up having 4 foot surgeries and have a scar on my face and my lip. And at that time, I still didn't stop drinking. I had stopped drinking for a while, and the accident happened, and I still continued on my path. Not until my end of my later 20s, early 30s, where I don't know. I got into another accident. So this is 2 accidents. And that accident, I ended up getting a DWI. So in the state of New Jersey, when you receive a DWI, you go through something called an IDRC. That's an Intoxicating Driving Resource Center, and that is required for you to get your license back. So at that time, I got into DWI. I lived on my own. I had to kind of reestablish myself and decide, okay, what am I going to do? I live on my own, moved back with my mom. And at that time, when I attended the IDRC, they ask you a bunch of questions. Hey, how's your drinking? How this happened? Because some people maybe overdrink over the influence or have a bad night and they get into it. But for me, I already had a history of various things. I had that accident when I was 26 where I literally was in a wheelchair. I had to learn how to walk again. And that still didn't change me. I think at this point in my life, I was maybe 31, 32, I had to give up a lot because I'd resisted. I didn't want to give up my independence. I didn't want to change. I didn't want to seem like someone who had an issue, right? Because in the culture, I'm from Dominican Republic, and in Latino cultures, and specifically in the area I was from, it's normal to drink. Yeah, you get a little drunk, whatever. You know, people see you as, you don't drink? Oh, you don't drink? You sure? Come on, let's have a drink. And
Mm.
it's very normalized. Anything that we do, baby shower, sweet 16, a get together, drinking is a constant. So that was hard for me to accept. And acceptance is something that I had an issue with. So when I ended up with the DWI, I go to the RDRC and they ask a bunch of different questions. And I qualified as having an issue from the way I assessed and I honestly answered. Because that was another thing. I never wanted to admit, because who wants to admit, right, that they're really going through a hard time, especially
Yeah.
culturally. And in our culture, we're taught to, eso no es nada, no te preocupes, sigue pa'lante. And those are words
Right.
of encouragement, right? And endearment, but sometimes they also validate these personas that we create. So when I did the assessment, the guy was like, "Hey, do you have a problem?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." And that moment was like, okay, I need to get help. During that time, I did a counseling program, which also has some dependency and substance in it. So I would see a therapist, a licensed social worker. I worked the 12 steps, and I drank. So at this point, I was 31. From the age of 21 to about 31, I struggled with alcohol. I've been car accidents. I've been arrested, and with all that, I still kept a job, had a bachelor's degree, functioning, lived on my own, but I had a secret, right? When you live on your own, you have a secret, and that's about the resisting living life and understanding life's term, resisting pain and resisting living in value and integrity, right? Doing the right thing when somebody's not watching. So if nobody really saw me drinking a bottle of wine and I lived by myself, it wasn't a problem, right? I'm a person, spiritual person. I believe in God, and I knew someone was there watching me, but I didn't think nothing of it because nobody knew. And there was many times that I've lost control and I lost friendships, relationships at that time. And then being back in this program that I was just talking about, seeing this therapist and having to go through the 12 steps, having to do the same regulations as people who were part of drug court programs, who were part of intermediate housing and different things, really made me say to myself, I'm not different than anybody else. So I had that time, this is like 8, 9 years ago. I was 8.5 years ago, right? I didn't have my license. I lived with my mom. I started a waitressing job. Mind you, I have a bachelor's in international business with a minor in psychology. So, I went from working at a, I guess top 10 financial institute, Bank of America, MBNA car services to waitressing in a buffet. So I would run into people. I had to start over. It was hard. It was hard because, you have pride. You have these expectations of yourself. So that was very hard for me. But I knew that the times that I've gotten in trouble, right? And I went through the things that I went through, God was always there because I didn't end up in jail. I didn't end up dead. I ended up hurt, right? I have a scar in my forehead. Had 17, I think, no, 20 something stitches here, 9 on my
Oh, wow.
nose, 17 in my mouth and lip from a car accident. I was drinking. I wasn't drunk, but I was drinking. I was when I was 26. Fast forward to when I was 31, 32, when I had to tell this therapist everything. That was the first time I shared all my relationships that I lost, my friendships that I lost, some of the, pinnacle of why did I drink? Why did I go through this thing? And I had low self-esteem. And some of it came from a relationship that I had when my first boyfriend who was emotionally abusive, verbally and also a little physical. So it was hard, right? To see yourself go through that at the age of 21, 22, 10 years later, you're still doing the same thing, expecting a different result. I think the
Yeah.
difference with this, I feel like I hit my rock bottom. I didn't have a car, I didn't have a license, I didn't have a job. I started working the waitressing job because it was the easiest thing I can get to. And I just was in the moment. I was honest with this therapist who I would keep in contact. I haven't spoken to him this year, but I reach out to him every so often and tell him how I'm doing because he it was very inspiring how much he just was there for me and taught me a lot. And I did that. It was like a 16-week um it's a 16-week program and therapy program, which I did, and I stopped drinking. And I stopped drinking 2014. And it was just that moment of all those things that happened when I went to the IDRC that day. And actually, I forgot to mention this. I was coming from New York from partying the night before, having to drive, feeling um hungover. And when I got there, I was like, I got to tell the truth. And that was the first time that I didn't resist. I said, okay, this pain, I have to go through this. I have to grieve this. I'm ready. And from 2014, it was, then I started my journey to where I'm at today.
Wow, Denise, thank you so much for sharing that. And it does take a lot of courage to actually put that out there, especially since at the time when you were going through it, I can only imagine the burden of carrying a secret so deep that it affected you physically, not just emotionally, but physically, and then affected the people around you, which just holding onto like something so deep and secretive is and especially like you were saying within the culture, there's this level of shame, and then of course there's the within the Latino culture you were saying, but also within just our cultural perspective of like the shame of
Mm-hmm.
the way that certain people act, and like shaming of people when they are going through like a difficult time, and like that is usually such a recourse, and I relate to that so deeply. I don't know to that capacity, but I relate to the aspect of being really stressed out and having it be like a crutch, having alcohol be a crutch. I used to work in corporate for about 15 some years, and the socialization was all around alcohol. And so
Same.
that's what, yeah, and that's what's so common with so many of our experiences. Socialization is like these and we end up, a lot of people end up having them be substance abuse problems. And so how was that, like, when you did share this information with the therapist and you started opening up to the truth of what was going on with yourself, and how it's been harming, like how it's been harming you, what transition for you in those moments? What transition for you, like, going forward after that?
I think what really put things to perspective is saying things out loud, talking about your emotions,
Yes.
identifying your behavior and people's reaction to the behavior and your reaction to their their reaction was important for me, because talking about it and kind of fine combing through those things was where I noticed how much I wasn't just a sufferer, I was also an engager, right? Because a lot of times I would say, well, if you love me, if you felt patient for me, you would understand that this is hard. But those were boundaries that they people were putting up, because they were also upset and hurt about what they saw and what I was going through. And that's something that I had to take accountability for. And that's what was transformative. Understanding how much pain I was in, and understanding how much pain I caused. And I didn't put those two together. They were always so separate to me. Because at the time when I was going through a lot of things, my friends would be like, Ash, you're fine. Just drink wine. Let's try this. Let's try that. And I would not succeed in any of those things, right? So it was to the point that I had to see that I was not only hurting me, I was hurting everyone. A lot of people were very hurt because they saw my potential and they saw what I can do, but I wasn't ready. And I say resisting because there's a book called The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris, who is a big a big person with ACT and acceptance commitment therapy, which is something that I practice a lot with my clients. And, you know, having this, when I get here, everything's going to be better mentality, right? Instead
Right.
of really understanding where your values are, clarifying your values at the moment that you're at, and living to those as a form of success. I didn't know how to do that because between the 20, you said corporate, I did that from 21 years old to 29 years old. I ended up, losing that job after 9 years, and things, I tried different things. I got into the podcast, like, the internet radio. I tried doing life insurance. I just tried different things because I was very stable in my career. Then when that shakeup came, I had to kind of reinvent myself. But though that time was just monotonous, I was just doing. I wasn't doing anything as a creative outlet. I may be working out here and there. I didn't have anything coping. So in that time when I worked with therapy and they spoke to me about that and asked me those questions, what you're saying, it was that I wasn't only suffering, I was also engaging. I was also not awakening myself. In the happiness trap, he talks about diffusing instead of infusing negative thoughts. I was always infusing them. I was always agreeing with that voice. Oh, yeah, you know what? That's true. You don't have time. Yeah, you don't have to stop drinking. It's with those people that you hang with that don't accept you. And I would say these things to justify these things. So that was what happened when I was saying things out loud, and I was identifying those emotions, my behaviors, people's reaction to it, and my reactions to those things is when I noticed, girl, you're not the only one that's suffering. You're making
Mm-hmm.
everyone else suffer too. And I was selfish.
Yes, that is wow. That's so much wisdom just in a couple seconds. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And you hit on so many great points. I really love the book that you brought up, especially with like the diffusing aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in those moments when we really take ownership and switch from the victim mentality, right? Because it's so easy. That's the easy way out. It really is. It's the easy way to be like, oh, they don't accept me because of my lifestyle, or they don't, or it's their problem, not my problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything, as we know now, people that are doing the work, people that are investing in themselves, becoming better people, they know that it all starts right here. It all starts with us. And so taking ownership of those actions, I love what you said about it being selfish, because when we are in the position of thinking that it's the other people, not us, pointing the finger at them, not only is it victim, but it also is very selfish of us to believe that we don't have any power in the situation.
I love that.
We have so much power in every single scenario, yet we give it up to, just like you were saying, that thought that comes in. That's
Yes.
like, I'm just going to listen to that thought. I'm going to listen to whatever that person says about me. That's true. Take it for my truth. When in reality, it's not our truth at all. And so that's why reclaiming our power is so important.
So
And
important.
I love the modality of reclaiming the power through talking things out, sharing those emotions, sharing it, actually bringing that stuff that's like settled inside and bringing it forth, because it's like when that it's so interesting when you end up talking things out, when you end up sharing things or journaling, like what comes out from that. It's like, whoa, I didn't even realize that was in there.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you and I spoke, I told you that in 2018, right before I started grad school and I got my master's, I did a podcast and it was Black Girls Need Healing Too. And I spoke about journaling and I spoke about doing that work, journaling about my life, really looking at the types of relationships I had, naming the things that I did in these relationships, what was things that I did, what was the things that those people didn't accept about me, and what was the good things about those people and the support that I had and what I missed out, because I had to make peace with some relationships. And that's also in when you do the 12 steps, you are asking for forgiveness and mending relationships. That doesn't mean the person's going to be like, oh, okay, we could be friends again. It's about you accepting and forgiving yourself and forgiving what you did to that person.
Totally.
If they do whatever they want to do with that, great, or not. And I remember speaking about journaling, and everything you said is very, very powerful, reclaiming that. And I talked about that piece, but I didn't talk about the extended because at that time I still didn't feel like I was ready. It wasn't about receiving my master's or having what I have. I just think that turning 40 and working in addictions, I also got um into getting my certified drug and alcohol counseling education hours because I eventually wanted to work with people in addiction and co-occurring, which are co-occurring mental health disorders as well as, addiction, right? They're dual diagnosis. And in 2014, when I got sober, I went back to school. I was like, okay, I'm waitressing. I'm going to go back to community college. I have my bachelor's. Let me take this certification. And I started learning about what addiction is. And I started learning about what types of, drug use and what that was. So I really went into educating myself because something about myself is that I always like to seek. I always like to learn. That was one of the biggest motivations in my life was that I said, okay, I have this, I have that. How am I going to reinvent myself? What am I going to do to move forward? Because I needed that motivation. It wasn't about me, feeling less than. It was hard. I would take the bus, have to walk. Like, a person in their early 30s who
Mm.
worked for an establishment like Bank of America, who knows the corporate, who made a lot of money, right? Moving back to her hometown, which my parents lived in, which wasn't the best environment, and having to see people still be in the same position and people that gave me their hand. I have a very good friend of mine who was there for me. And I will always see the negative with that voice. And in that therapy session, oh, yeah, they are helping me, but, they still judge me instead of looking at their actions in the time of present. So learning was one thing that motivated me. And when I did, I met this professor. He's like, oh, you should do social work. I was like, I don't know. I'm already doing these classes that's taken a year and a half. I'm, rebuilding my life. And I even did substitute teaching, I did a couple of things in between just to push myself because forward movement, I didn't want to be in that maze. I didn't want to be in that past. So, oh, I did this, I did that, I did this. I was like, let me just motivate myself, and I sought to grow. And it hurt. It was painful. I cried for like a year and a half, I think, the first year that I stopped drinking. I didn't know how to laugh the same. I didn't know how to really date the same. And at that time I met my fiance who doesn't drink. So
Mm.
spiritually, right? I was, going through that, and I met him who never been a drinker, doesn't have that. I'm like, what? And then it just, that grew, and I took my time to be present. I say all of that to say is that it's very important to take that first step, to be able to
Yeah.
be honest with yourself. And like you said, reclaim your power because I gave everybody my power a lot of times. And I blamed a lot of people when it was really me. I had that
Yeah.
ability.
What a humbling experience. And it sounds like from your experience, sharing that, is that with so many things, when we are basically, you were saying, constructing this new identity, reinventing yourself,
Mm-hmm.
in order to do that, it's like you have to completely destroy the foundation, like everything that you once identified yourself with, this person that was alcoholic, that was dependent, that was judgmental, that was like a victim, like all these like different identity layers. It was you had to tear those away. And as painful as it was, like reinventing yourself, and like you got to become this new person. You got to literally create yourself as a new person. I mean, you're still, of course, the same Denese, right?
Yes.
Inside.
Yes.
But creating this, creating this new identity, creating this new outlook on life has allowed you to become the amazing person that you are meant to be. And so for you, like what, and that takes, that takes a level of self-patience, self-love, self-compassion, like a lot of different things. And you were saying it was challenging. What were some things that were like uplifting when it came to like giving yourself that energy and effort?
My faith, I've always been a person who uses prayer, used quiet time and meditation, which was something that I used to just be like, "Bleh, meditation," because I lived such a fast life. I worked in
Right.
corporate, I worked in the credit card finance industry. I was super busy. I had to unlearn how to slow down, and prayer, practicing mindfulness, not just sitting in meditation or listening to high frequency or anything that's, what I do now. It was just about taking a walk and focusing on the walk, taking the time to look outside and looking outside and drinking coffee, not being on the phone so much, not feeling like loneliness was my enemy, more of understanding that the difference between being alone and the difference between feeling lonely. And
Love that.
it was just incredible that I had to slow down. I mean, I am a little bit fast paced. I am, a Jersey girl, East Coast person, 100%, and Dominican, and even our culture, hablamos rápido and all of that. But this is me at a slower pace. This is me when
Yes.
you listen to a podcast at that 1x, 2x, and you slow it down, like, hey, because I had to unlearn that. And it's about
Yes.
rewiring those things. And that, Sarita, it takes time. And you know that. We had these conversations about when, before having the podcast about those specific things. It's just a lot to unpack. So I would say prayer, mindfulness, and I did a lot of journaling, and I was seeking knowledge. I was always trying to learn what is addiction? What's the history of my family? What is it that why did I drink? And identifying what pain am I resisting? What emotion am it's inevitable, right? And that's the hardest thing, even in acceptance commitment therapy, they talk about resistance, right? Because you're resisting something that has to happen for you to be able to proceed. And if you cannot accept it and commit to changing it, you're going to cause more pain, and you're going to cause more grief because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And that's what I used to feel. I would go to so many different places and meet people, and they're like, "Man, they would tell people, like, compliment me and say things to me." And I'm like, "For real? You think so? You think I'm great?" And it was about also affirming myself. I am great. I know who I am. I know what I done. I know what I can do. That also helped me a lot. Just really understanding to be in the moment. Because when you're in the moment, you look around and you observe, and you're using observations as context of how you're talking, what you're hearing, and really being in that, being present gives you gratitude, because we don't have to be here, you know? It's we never know. And I literally played around and risked my life with the type of things I did with drinking. That two major accidents that I had, incidents that I had before that I could have done jail time. I could have been, and I didn't. And I'm like, I look at that now, and especially because my wedding's coming. I was thinking about doing this today and talking to you, and I was crying because I said, man, I can never see myself being that unloving and feeling that undeserving, because I know that I'm here for a reason. I mean, don't want to go into super details, but my goodness, I'm like, I
Right.
can never be that person anymore. I feel like there is
Hmm.
parts of me, and I accepted all of me. That's the key. All of
Right.
me, prayer, meditation, journaling, and affirming myself, but I accepted it. And that was a fight that I had, even when I kept thinking to myself, so what am I going to say? How am I going to do this interview? Because especially that I'm a creative, I'm in the podcasting world, and I also do private therapy with clients. And I'm like, what if my client listens to this one? You know, it's me. I'm not ashamed of it. And then that I just wasn't sure if I was ready to be solely solely committed to that vulnerability and that courageousness. But after turning 40, I was like, I'm confident. That made me talk to you at this exact moment in time. So I would say that you gotta be whole. You gotta accept everything, the scars, the accidents. I mean, come on, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's you.
I love that, Denise. You just warmed my heart. My heart just was like, oh,
Oh, well,
that was
thank you. I'm
very
an emotional
expansive.
person.
I am
I'm
as
like
well.
water.
I
Yeah, I
am as
feel
well.
it, and I
So
appreciate you for this.
I
Thank
I
you.
feel that so heavily, and I mean, you just said so much that I want to reflect on. But a big thing at the very beginning you said is just you hit something on the head where so many of us, I think there is the issue of slowing down and not accepting ourselves because we're scared of this aspect of feeling lonely, when in fact loneliness is so much different than being like in solitude, right? Solitude is filling up your cup and spending time, quality time with yourself, versus loneliness is coming from a place of like scarcity. I really truly believe like
Oof.
there's nobody else that is going through this, so therefore I'm the only one, right? Instead of being like solitude is something that I get to do this for me because I'm worth it, and I'm embracing, just like you said, I'm embracing all aspects of me, and I get to spend time with me.
I love that. I'm gonna use that and be like, yeah, Sadi, that is so true. Scarcity is huge. It's that was very, very true. You know what? You said something that I've been talking about a lot, and I see a lot of that rendition kind of intertwining, specifically now in the holiday times with family, when people are like, "You're all I have. You're the only one. I'm the only one feeling this way. Why does this happen to me?" Those phrases validate and justify those negative emotions and deep pain that you're resisting. That's what happens, and we tend to say things like that. And we really, if you're a person who believes in the universe, you believe in God and whatever type of spirituality you're into, we sometimes manifest these egregious things that can happen to us by saying things like that. Oh God, here we go again. And something as simple as wording and what we say was something that I also had to rewire myself to figure out how powerful, my words were, how powerful my thoughts were. Because, I come from a lineage of family who's very spiritual. I have a podcast I'm all shamelessly plugging it, um, called Creencias, where I talk about, this fictional character who my grandmother was a spiritual advisor, and it's based on loosely how I grew up. And we always had rituals and things that we believed in and things that gave us hope and faith. And in that regard, I always sought to need knowledge and lean on that because of the way I was upbringing. But I also use that as it also was not good for me because I also use that as a negative. Like, well, I need to be this way and I need to be this way. I need to be this way. And it's about, like you said, being able to be comfortable in doing things for you. And that scarcity came from me not meeting those expectations as well. Those things that I leaned on, right? But I couldn't meet them because of how terrible I was living my life and how, just I wasn't even in that moment. I wanted to fast forward. I wanted to be in the next, more, 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 more. If I get this, if I get that, I'm going to be happy. And I wasn't.
Right. Mm. And that goes back to the book that you were referencing
Yes.
about really appreciating and what was it you were saying that it was your morals and like the things you actually
Oh,
believe
yeah, your
in,
values.
your
Yes, your
values,
values.
right? To
That's
really
huge.
live up to the values of where you are at this moment. And it's only natural. I mean, I
For
don't think
sure.
there's any human being on this planet that doesn't like look ahead and want to be at another level than where they're at right now. Simultaneously, it's like a dance. Simultaneously, you can do that and desire to create and
Yes.
manifest, while simultaneously, something you said at the very beginning is being in this place of gratitude, really appreciating like where we are in these moments, wherever you are in these moments, because that's where the present, that's where you are, that's where the present, which
Mm-hmm.
is the really the inspiration behind this podcast. back to center, meaning coming back to this place, coming back to self, coming back to the person that you need the most, which is you.
Yeah. That's very, very, very well put. Absolutely. It's about always clarifying your values in the moment that you're in. And something that they talk about in that book is about living towards your value, and that's also success. People measure success monetarily, aesthetically, materially, right? But what values do you hold at this moment that you are living very closely to and being integral in it? Is what is satisfying, because some people never do that. Some people never even live up to their own values and their own expectations. Look, I'm not perfect, obviously, and I say this to my clients a lot, to be relatable, because in the type of practice that I work in now, it's easier for me to be more relatable than other jobs that I worked in other places, just because of the setting, and also culturally, in Latino culture and Caribbean culture, people want to be relatable to you, right? You want to connect. I say that to them. Listen, that was me. I understand. I can understand you. I sympathize, but sometimes I can empathize because I've been there, and I use that more now, and I'm more relaxed in the way that I engage with my clients, because I do want to empower them. I'm not here to change those things about them. I'm here to help them understand that how could they decrease these behaviors? How can they maybe, understand why, and maybe change the symptoms that they're feeling from it? But a lot of the good things and qualities that they have, it might be extreme for whatever reason. And I think that sometimes that's where I'm coming from, a place of working with one-on-one. And I really do enjoy what I do. I think they can tell that sometimes. And sometimes I had to learn also too that I can't carry everything. And that was something else that I had to learn. It's always learning every day, right? But I have to do that because I'm committed. And that's the
Right.
difference. I'm committed.
I love that. We can definitely, that's another conversation. I was going to say carrying everything is something
Whew.
that we're so conditioned as women, especially Latino women, to believe that we need to carry it all. Women of color, that we're required to carry it all. That is another conversation for another day.
Girl.
But that could
Encanto.
be,
Okay?
exactly. Yeah, that movie says it exactly. Yeah. I absolutely love how you said empathy, and that actually kind of rolls into my next question. The empathy, because you have been, like I explained, and you've explained, like you've been on the other side, right? You've experienced what it's been like to go from breakdown to reclaiming yourself. And so there's a level of empathy that you have with your clients and the people that you meet, because because you've been there before. That being said, for somebody that is going through, so kind of nuggets of wisdom, even more, because I know you've shared so much already, but somebody that's going through maybe not even like a substance abuse problem, but somebody that is going through such a very challenging time, maybe with, because we covered boundaries, we covered a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of words of wisdom would you provide for them, or affirmations would you provide for them as they go through a difficult time transitioning? Because transitioning can seem so overwhelming, because you're literally breaking everything down and constructing anew, right? Like we talked about. But what words would you share with them?
I would say that if you are going through a transitioning phase and just a very challenging time in your life, don't judge yourself. Just be without judgment. And judgment is something that we all do. I'm guilty of it. Like I said, I made mistakes, right? And I make them every day. I made like 5 today, probably more. So, not judging yourself. The reason I say judgment, because once we judge ourselves, we start to shame. And you mentioned shame. Shame is such an empty emotion. Brene Brown has an amazing TED Talk, amazing books
I
on.
love that.
Uh, love her. The vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
right? It has courage.
Mm-hmm.
We in Latino, Caribbean, and Black African American, and in different communities are taught that vulnerability. Specifically, where I was raised in a very, I guess you can say, urban, very rough neighborhood. People take kindness as weakness, and we also talk about vulnerability being weakness. It's not. So judging yourself is a form of being weak on yourself, because why? Why judge yourself? Because once you shame yourself, you start to break down your great qualities, characteristics, and traits. Those same traits that can strengthen you, and you can see what skills in this adversity, in this challenging moment, what skills and what qualities do I possess that can help me kind of transition a little better. For example, one of the things that I felt I had a strong quality in was I have a very high tolerance in patience. Very patient person. So I use that patience during this challenging time to say, Denise, you are patient. This is temporary. This is going to get better. This is just your journey. This is temporary. Things are going to get better. I use my patience as a tool to motivate myself. And instead of making that moment a forever moment and permanent, I always address it as something temporary. Here we are 8 years later and a half. I'm getting married. I'm a licensed social worker. I have a 5-year-old son. I have an amazing fiance who I love and have beautiful friends and family. And I didn't say, well, it took me 8 years. I said, thank you for it happening. Stop judging it. I would say judgment is huge because you shame yourself. Once you shame yourself, you start nitpicking. So don't judge yourself. Another thing, too, that I see a lot of people do, and I've seen this a lot culturally, even something that I've done in myself, is kind of kind of look down on meditation and mindfulness. Because I think in the last few years, meditation has been overly used, right? Just like the word pivot, right? We've heard this so much.
Right?
And right? You're like, come on,
Mm-hmm.
when are we gonna stop saying that? So it's one of those things where I started talking about when I watched this documentary recently with Jonah Hill and his therapist. I don't know if you saw it, called Stutz. It's this he's like a psychotherapist for many years. He uses these toolbox, these very instant tools that he gives to his clients to use, right? To kind of facilitate the resistance of pain. So, he said this most importantly, which I'm going to say is the fact that we can use our imagination. And listening to that, watching that, and being a mom and seeing my son, how much he pretends and how much he imagines, we can imagine. And that's also a form of meditating, imagery, visualization. You don't have to
Totally.
sit there. And I think that's something that I literally realized this year, like to use that imagination versus meditation. So I ask my clients, what do you see yourself as? What do you visualize? What do you think you can do? Visualization was something important for me. Didn't judge myself. I observed myself and I visualized, okay, I'm going to get my CADC. Okay, I'm going to start waitressing. Okay, I see myself being a social worker. I see myself doing these things. And that was also motivational to me because I gave myself some goals and some, viewpoints of what I can do next. So not judging yourself, being able to use imagery and visualize things, which is also a form of meditation because you are taking the time to focus and hone in and manifest in a way, right? So that was something that I did. And I would say lastly is stop putting your anxiety, if it's manageable, and your depression, and even people who have ADHD, putting it as something that's not part of you. Sometimes my clients will talk about the anxiety like it's not what they're in.
Detached. Mm-hmm.
They detach themselves from it. Be in it because the anxiety is part of you in your everyday journey. The anxiety, the depression, no, I deal with it. I One thing that I learned too with working in what I've been doing in private practice is how the body when you're going through trauma, and there's a good book called The Body Keeps the Score that talks
Love
about,
that book. Mm.
amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about when you are in trauma, your mind does not process any new information. So your body and your central nervous system and your autonomic and your somatic are and like in heightened, right? So what happens when you cannot process new information because you're so traumatizing? We need safety. We need to reestablish you and bring you to safety. So when you're anxious and you're depressed, reestablish yourself and ground yourself in the things that you have in the home, right? Your basic needs, in grounding yourself in that part can help you understand that it's just a temporary thing. And what happens is we train our bodies to go into fight and to freeze, right? Because we are not in it. Every time you see a dog barking, this is an example that they use in a lot of the trainings, right? Very dog is barking, the dog bit me for. As soon as I see the dog barking, oh my God, I start to sweat. I start to go into panic. But if you get closer to this dog, and it's like aversion therapy, you get closer, you desensitize yourself from it because you're resisting the pain.
Right.
Yes, it's going to make your heart, but you're training your central nervous system to protect you because you're so scared of this dog, right? And you're so scared of this emotion. So it's about not judging yourself, about being able to understand where you're at and understanding your motivation. And then also stop detaching yourself from the anxiety and the depression. It's a part of you. The more that you resist that, the bigger you create the anxiety and the depression. If you're in it, unless you're okay, unless it's you want to harm yourself, or you're going to harm someone else, or it's debilitating to the point that then that's a different conversation and you can't complete your daily activities. But you have to be able to little by little desensitize yourself from it because it takes time to rewire the brain. And you know that in the book they talk about that, especially with how your body is going to be. Because a lot of times anxiety and depression is physiological, right? It's not only about our thoughts and our emotions, right? So body movement, mindfulness. Those are the things I would say. Most of all, don't judge yourself and don't detach yourself from the anxiety. Everything in between come, but understand that's a part of you. And it's hard to accept things. Resistance is so real. And I use resistance a lot because I'm like, wow, that's all I did. All I did waste 10 years. I said to myself, but it didn't. It wasn't a waste. It made me who I am. And I can never, I don't want to say never. I don't see myself in risking things and being as careless because I know too much and I'm too accountable and too responsible. And that's what people are scared of. Right? And it's hard. But yeah, detaching yourself. Thank you for that. That was very, very wise. Yeah, because that's what it is. They do that all the time. Oh yeah, and I'm like, but it's there. It's of course. It's never gonna go away.
Great.
It's gonna increase and decrease.
Great, like 3 tips at the very end. Great points. Like, don't judge yourself. Visualize where you want to be. And
there you go, 'cause I almost
detach. That was the second one. And don't detach yourself from the emotions that you're feeling, or all the above. It is a part of you. Denese, thank you so much for all this juicy information. I was so excited to connect with you, and definitely will stay connected. You are such a plethora of experience and knowledge and embodiment on top of that. Like, I love everything that you're about. I love the contrasting parts of your life that have come together so beautifully with the podcasting and the social work, and just seeing like how this has been created in this particular episode, and sharing that story with us, sharing that experience with us, and it being really the first time that you're sharing it on a social platform. I'm so honored.
Yes, in that way,
you've been here today. It means so much to me that you've come to the courageous point that you can share that with an audience. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Well, thank you. I'm so emotional. Like I said, I'm getting married and literally I didn't even picture having this beautiful kind of big wedding and really celebrating, because at one point I didn't even think that I would get married or have children. So to share this, and I'm glad that I did it the way that I did, and I spoke to you, and you have a great platform. What you're doing is really important, and also is teaching us, whoever's on here, that vulnerability is acceptable.
Yes,
and it's also
is.
Courageous. And thank you for that. And I couldn't have done this if you and I would not connect. I am so excited for your journey and your show.
Thank you so much. Yes, sharing vulnerability is healing, and that is the whole purpose of these beautiful self-embrace stories. Thank you all so much for joining me in this episode of Self-Embrace Stories. We will see you next time. Thank you again, Denese.
Bye. No problem.
Hey love, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you adored what you heard, it would mean the world to me if you took a moment to leave a review on the platform you are listening to this episode on. By doing this, you are helping my mission to impact other women with their healing journeys. If you aren't already following me on social media, make sure to connect with me at Sarita Wellness to get your weekly dose of inspiration. I can't wait to be with you in the next episode, but in the meantime, keep being the amazing you that you are.